So, if that means you need to meet with the CEO, or that means you need to meet with the CFO, or whatever it may be, key product execs, just make sure and ask those questions. It doesn't hurt to ask, is there anyone you need me to meet with that I haven't met with? Be open about that. And then sort of the last thing, giving you probably too much data here, but is leakage. Any public company doesn't want sort of leakage in terms of what we're doing or what they're doing, et cetera. That could kill a deal, and that speaks to keeping the circle of trust within your own company very small, and only letting those who need to know about it.
Can we pick up on that thread of information exchange, leakage, telling the truth, as Mark was describing? And I think a lot of startups have a lot of concern about revealing too much about their startup, especially if the acquirer is in the same space or quasi-competitive. How does a startup kind of open the kimono without giving you all the information that if the deal unravels, puts them at a disadvantage? Any words of advice for that? Throw it out to anyone who's got an opinion.
Well, I'd say a couple things. One, and Rick, I think, made a very good point about making sure you have very good lawyers working with you from the very beginning of the formation of your company, and not only helping you with financing, but also relative to M&A. I think that alone is invaluable. Bankers are not my best friends, and I think don't actually add a lot of value, to Rick's point, in terms of smaller deals. The lawyers are absolutely the key element there from my perspective. But you protect yourself. There are NDAs. We take NDAs seriously. We'll want you to sign an NDA, and you should want that as well to help protect you. But at some point, and you need to look yourself and the founders and the VCs potentially in the face, you need to give me the information. So we can work over a time-phased approach. That works. That's fine. But we're going to need to see the information. We protect ourselves when we're looking at source code by outsourcing that review to a third party. So that's not someone at Microsoft doing that. Again, that's should give you some comfort, and certainly gives us a lot of comfort, so that we don't down the road have any issues about taint. But at some point, you're going to have to have made that decision that you want to sell. You want to sell perhaps to Microsoft, and you're willing to go down that process, which means information exchange.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just a quick add to that. Lawyers are extremely important. The good ones will get you a lot more than you expect. I think that in addition to making sure you protect your technology, your source code, people are your best assets. So it's not unusual for you to ask for a non-solicit if that's what you are really worried about. Acquirers don't like that, so just keep that in mind. But I've seen it many times. So it's another way to protect your people assets from getting poached if an acquisition doesn't work out. But one thing I would say is I think all of us here and many acquirers that you're going to run into really care about their own reputation. So it's not good for them to just do due diligence on you with the intention of stealing or figuring out how to build it. If they are truly interested in buying you, they will most likely go through with it unless they find something wrong with it. So I want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask for a 1-year non-solicitation clause. 2 years gets a little bit long, but I think 1 year is perfectly reasonable. And just like what Mark said, I think we try to protect ourselves as well and our reputation, and we're very conscious of tainting. We'll go to a third party to help evaluate the technology. If it's an internal team, it'll be maybe a team from another business unit that's kind of qualified to evaluate the technology or the product. And so we try to keep a Chinese wall between them and the directly affected business unit. But, most big companies, I think, are consciously aware of their reputation and are not going to try to, by and large, look at your code or your technology or whatever and then go try to build it on their own.
Reputation is really a good one. That's a great point you raised. No one wants to be labeled the shark or the bad guy out there, and we're in a small world here, and everyone knows everyone, so you got to keep that in mind. I think the other thing to note, don't hide too much. It's certain things are competitive, certain things aren't, right? So I mean, if you're in a discussion and you have an NDA and you feel comfortable and you trust the individual or the team you're working with, for example, sharing certain financial metrics in my mind are not really competitive, depending on which space you're in. If you have a directly competitive product, etc. If you get into a deeper conversation, there may be select individuals that want to see certain parts of the code, for example, or other things that may be more sticky or sensitive. You take those things in phases. I think asking the acquirer sort of what do they need to make a decision and to give you sort of the next step, right? So whether that's a term sheet or this valuation, whatever it may be, ask what they need and determine if you're comfortable to get there, because depending on the transaction, it depends sort of what the data is. If it's 5 individuals who have a great product but don't have any revenue, I want to meet people, right? If it's a company with a great sales model and a lot of revenue, I want to know more about the model. I want to know more about sort of metrics, etc. And so it really depends. But if you hide too much, it's a great way to sort of turn us off, and I think that's pretty consistent across the board.
One last little one to insert before my last question. Rick talked about doing due diligence on the VCs by asking, have you ever blocked a sale? What are the hard questions that a startup that is in discussions with you should be asking you? What are the hard questions you get? Can you touch on that? Asking for a non-solicitation is an interesting one. Anything else that hopefully you won't be, negotiating against these guys, but what should they be?
Suggest we tell them to ask us?
Right. Yeah.
A question I hear a lot is sort of, what's my future at the company? Who do I report to? Right, the simple stuff, but in general, they're actually pretty important questions. And if you leave them unanswered for too long, it looks like you don't have a plan. And so I think you need to be very clear and understand. You need to understand sort of what the company's strategy is for your small company or your mid-sized company, whatever it may be, longer term. So are you going to be happy, or are your teammates going to be happy if the acquisition actually occurs? That's a question, at least, that I would want to ask, and I've heard asked a lot. It's pretty simple. It's not the most difficult thing to talk about, but it's one that comes up quite a bit. There's probably more I have, but I'll pass it down.
Yeah, who am I working for? Does that person have any acquisition integration experience? What was the worst acquisition you did and why did it fail? Like, those are all fair game questions.
Same.
Yeah, I think just what I said before about really focusing on a couple of key things on the integration plan is critical. A lot of those softer cultural issues kind of don't get kind of their fair share of attention. I think really focusing on those is key.
All right, one last, and then we'll open it up. We have some public companies on the panel here, so I realize some of this might be sensitive, but let's go down the line and talk about what's on your shopping list. Salesforce, you talked about social, mobile. There was a third one I forgot. What kind of companies are you looking for? If you can prognosticate on how many deals you think you'll do, give these guys some hope that they're.
That's the one I'm going to lob to you first.
Yes.
So I think there are certain areas that are just very interesting in general right now, and including for us. I think at the top of the list is mobile payments. I think payments generally, very interesting right now, whether it's prepaid debit cards, peer-to-peer payment networks, etc. Everyone's got, Visa and MasterCard, I have huge targets on their back by almost every payment startup. I would say that what I would call, web-based customer acquisition / e-commerce. So obviously the most obvious candidates there are the kind of the Groupon and the like. But that extends to kind of online lead matching, like a Service Magic or a Red Beacon. I think is also very interesting to us. What else? Those are probably the main ones right now.
estimate of how many deals are you looking?
Well, so we have a lot of cash on the balance sheet,
Yeah.
which is not a good reason to go do a bunch of acquisitions. But you know, I think going forward, we'd probably like to average, you know, maybe 4 a year, of various sizes.
170 million times 4 a year starts to chip away at
So
that
that
cash.
comes out about right,
Yeah.
about
All right.
700 million.
Perfect.
We don't think about in terms of number of deals, so that's not part of how we look at things. There's tons of areas, and this is where M&A meshes with what was mentioned before, is really about strategy, right? You start with your strategy, and M&A is one tactical way of actually helping you reach your strategy. We're building and going to build most of the things we end up bringing to market. It's who we are, and given the resources we have, that is how we think about it. But it won't be surprised that things around the cloud, things around unified communication, things around search and differentiated search experiences would be three of the big things that come screaming to mind. We also think about collaboration a lot. We have an enterprise collaboration platform called SharePoint that we think is pretty special. So there are tons of things, but they match exactly what Microsoft is working on building as well.
How many did Microsoft do last year? I don't know if I.
Total number of transactions was 8.
Okay. Good.
So for LinkedIn, we don't have a number either. I would say that there's probably an upper bound of what we can do this year. There's half of me who does this, and then there's a full-time person on my team. And so if you think about the fact that we do all the sourcing, negotiating, execution, and integration, it's not a lot of deals that we can do. Now, we could add resources, but that's not in the plans. So I would say an upper bound of 4 to 6 for the rest of this year would be quite high for us. In terms of the areas that we look at, we actually do have 5 different areas we look at, but because we're in registration, I can't really say what they are. But rest assured, they're all professionally related because we're LinkedIn. But that actually helps a lot versus when I was at Yahoo, where we looked at every single thing. At LinkedIn, if you're not professionally related or somehow helping professionals be more productive or successful, we probably wouldn't look at you.
Yep. So for Salesforce, you know, this is the common answer, so I'll use it, which is that there isn't a target number. I don't think we operate that way. We don't intend to. We're very well meshed with our product organization, and just in general, you look across the board, we try to reach out to as many people in the company as we can and understand sort of what's important. If acquisition is something that, you know, is appropriate at the right time, then that's a vehicle that we use, and that's, you know, that's why I'm part of the team, and you know, we have other individuals who are part of the team as well. If you look across sort of the board in terms of some deals, you know, that I can at least talk about, you know, we stick to our strategy, which is, as I've mentioned many times, which is, you know, social, mobile, and open. And, you know, we have 92,000 plus customers that, you know, what things related to our core strategy, you know, is there a necessary area that maybe an acquisition makes sense? And so if I think about the platform for Salesforce, you know, Heroku is a good example of that. If I think about our Sales Cloud, Jigsaw is a good example of that. If I think about Chatter, you know, DimDim, for example, is a good sort of alignment to that. And so things that help to grow our current clouds and sort of make us more successful, make our customers more successful, those are the types of things that we focus on. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily, you know, hunting and there's like a board that we need to hit, you know, 4 or 5 deals. It's not really the point.
How many last year?
More than 3.
More than 3?
Yeah.
Quite a few, yeah? More than that, wasn't there?
Yeah.
All right. Politician over here. Let's open it up to the audience. Who's got the mic? Cassie is our mic. Yes. Why don't we start in the middle here?
Thanks. You're all global players and actually global leaders in what you do. And I wondered if you could speak to the global competition and acquisition landscape a bit more, especially in an era where governments are actually promoting local copycats and enforce or trying to pursue antitrust